Hi, welcome to educator.com. Today we're going to start with an overview of macroeconomics. So we're going to do an introductory lecture to figure out what economics really is about. And so this is the first course, so let's dive right into the material. So in today's lesson overview, we're going to define economics. So what exactly is economics and the problem of scarcity that exists for every individual and business? So in macroeconomics, as we go further into the course, we're going to deal with issues like inflation or unemployment. But before we get into that, we have to deal with a little bit more of the foundational problems of economics. We're going to identify the 4 factors of production or resources, understand the role of opportunity costs in making decisions. So again, opportunity cost is one of the things that really has to be learned inside and out in order to progress in this course. Explain the difference between positive and normative economics. Explain the law of increasing costs in the context of a production possibilities frontier graph. We're also going to identify points of efficiency and underutilization. And then finally, we're going to differentiate between an increasing and constant cost production possibilities frontier graph. Basically, what this is being able to identify trade-offs and opportunity costs in the context of an opportunity cost graph. But again, all the things that we're going to be learning is pretty much going to be the concept of scarcity and opportunity costs. So what is economics? So what exactly is economics here? So if you want to break down into a simple definition, it's the study of how people seek to satisfy their needs and wants by making choices. So economics, if it really boils down to it, it's not necessarily about the stock market. It's not about the Federal Reserve or fiscal policy. It's really the idea of making choices. And what scarcity is the concept of having unlimited wants versus having limited resources. Whether you're talking about individual or government, we want this, we want that, but we're limited by the types of resources that we have. So ultimately, we make choices based on our limited resources. So everyone deals with scarcity because resources are scarce. Again, it doesn't matter if you make $10,000 a year. Doesn't matter if you're a poor, struggling student. Doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg and you have tons and tons of money. You're still going to deal with the concept of scarcity. I think University of Chicago economist Gary Becker, he coined it appropriately. He believes that economics is the art of making the most of life. So economics really is about making the choices given the fact that we have very limited resources. We don't have an infinite amount of resources. When we have a limited amount of resources, and we got to allocate them properly. So what are the 4 factors of production? So there are some econ textbooks, some texts and professors will say there are 3 factors, but the 4th factor, it's there, but it can be construed to be part of the 3 factors as well. So the first factor is land. So we have the first factor, production. The second factor is labor. The third factor is capital, and we'll discuss the different types. And the 4th factor of production is going to be entrepreneurship. So these are the 3 or 4 factors of production, and we'll go in depth to see what does each factor of production actually entail. So land, what is land? It's natural resources that are used to make goods and services. So these are God-given resources that just exist that people use in order to create output. Labor is the effort that people devote for a paid task. So labor means that you're utilizing individuals in the pursuit of creating an output. And then capital would be any human-made resources used to create other goods and services. And within capital, there's actually 2 types of capital. There's physical capital, which would be tools. So this right here, this board that you see right here, this pen that you see here, this is physical capital. This building that I'm filming this lecture in, this is also physical capital. And then you have human capital, which would be skills and knowledge through education and experience. So hopefully, as you're learning about scarcity, as you're learning about macroeconomics through this course, you're learning a little bit about human capital. And that's the reason why you go to college. You want to build your human capital so that you can get a higher paying job. So that's basically what human capital is. And then finally, you have entrepreneurship. And what that requires is a person who uses the three factors of production to create goods and services. So you have a combination of this, and this is a factor market. So these are things that occur that people have in order to produce an output. So let's take a look a little bit about further about the definition of economics, which is needs and wants, and again, having limited resources here. So what I like to do as an exercise is for my students, I like to have them come up with a list of different needs and wants. And so the list we have here, again, it's obviously going to vary, but these are some possible needs that students actually come up with as high school students, right? Movie tickets. So that would be one thing that a lot of high school students might say that they need. Another thing would be a car. A lot of high school seniors, mostly seniors are the ones that are taking this AP Econ class. They're driving, so they'll need a car. And again, if you're watching this right now, you're thinking to yourself, I need that 5 on the macroeconomics exam. So absolutely, and absolutely, I'm absolutely committed to getting you that 5 on the AP exam. So that's what you need. Need food, absolutely. You need food. I mean, you can go a little bit more specific what type of food, but food. A lot of students will say they'll need food. Internet access. Do you need internet access? Well, let's take a look. I mean, without internet access, you wouldn't be accessing this lecture. So you need internet access to get some studying done. You need clothing. Probably don't want to be naked, so clothing would definitely be considered a need. Again, depending on the definition here. Television. Well, I mean, how would you be entertained? You definitely do need a television, right? You need friends. What we would do without friends, right? Friends are something that absolutely every high school senior would need here. And, usually we have some more, basic needs like water. Okay. So if we actually break down this list here, what I have my students do is break down and analyze what are actual things on this list that you don't need. I think as we were going through this, some of you guys were pointing out, well, maybe we don't need this. And, let's actually break down individually. What are the things that obviously we don't need? And we could categorize as more of a want rather than need. So I think a movie ticket. I think a movie ticket, if you really break it down, do you really need a movie ticket? And the answer is no. There's several alternatives, right? So let's cross this out. Movie tickets are something that we don't need. You could watch a video. You could watch online streaming. You know what? Again, not something that I would personally recommend, but you could sneak inside the theater instead of a movie ticket. That's definitely something you could do, right? Do you need a car? And a car would be nice. Definitely, if you have a car, that's great. But can you walk? Can you get a ride from your mom or dad? Can you get a bike? Can you get rollerblades? I mean, there's definitely alternatives to having a car. So you don't need a car because need implies that there's no other alternative, right? Do you need a 5 on the AP Macroeconomics exam? Well, again, I absolutely do hope that you are going to get a 5 on this exam, and I'm committed to helping you achieve that goal. But do you need that 5? Would a 4 be okay? Would you still be okay with a 4? Again, some of you guys, if you're an overachiever, absolutely not. But do you really need that 5? I mean, do you need to take the exam? Do you need a 3? I think we can confidently eliminate that 5. You don't need a 5 on the AP exam. Now, what about food? Do you need food? Well, let's categorize that as something maybe we do need, but we'll go ahead and address that later. Internet access. All right, you don't need internet access. Okay. If you grew up in the 80s, you never heard of the internet, and people still were able to communicate with each other. They called each other through the telephone. Instead of accessing the internet to find an article, people actually went to the library. So you don't need internet access. Clothing. All right, let's tackle clothing here. Do you need clothing? Clothing would be nice, but you don't need clothing. An alternative would be nakedness, and that would land you, maybe a night in prison for indecent exposure. But you don't need clothing. It's absolutely there's an alternative to clothing, which is nakedness, and again, a night in prison for indecent exposure. Again, not something very pleasant, but that is an alternative, right? Okay, television. Again, in this day and age, the chances are there are some of you watching this that have decided to abandon television. Instead, everything is is watched through the internet. So instead of having television, you can have the internet. And how about instead of watching television, you can go outside and hang out with your friends, or you can decide to help out with your parents, help out around the house with doing chores, right? Friends, do you need friends? And I would say absolutely not. Are friends nice to have? Do you want friends? Again, I'm not here to make a judgment one way or the other, but friends are something you definitely don't need. Instead of friends, you could have a family, or, you know, if you have no friends at all, you know, get a dog. That works as a substitute. So we're left with food and water here on this list. I would say in the order of wants, I would want water first, and then food. Now, do I need food? And again, some of you guys might say, yeah, I need food. I need to go in and out. I need to eat. I need to eat in order to live. Well, you know, I won't necessarily disagree with you with that, but do you need food? And I would say absolutely not. Do you need water? Absolutely not. Now, the alternative might be death. It's definitely not a preferable alternative, but if you look at basic, you know, needs and wants, the reality in economics is that we don't need anything. Okay, again, taking this to the extreme, obviously death is not a pleasant alternative, but you know, anything on here on this list, there is an alternative, and therefore we need nothing. And so the working definition that we're gonna have here in this course is that need means that there is no alternative, meaning that it cannot be replaced by anything else. That means, you know, is there no alternative for water? And we've determined that the alternative for water at some point would be death. And again, that's the extreme. But if you look at the world around you based on resources and what you need versus what you want, and you categorize everything as being a want, then that's basically the mind frame that economists use when making decisions at the macroeconomic level here. So basically, we do not need anything. We don't need anything. If you look at that, then it almost frees you up into figuring out, well, we don't need anything, so we want a lot of things, and we make choices based on that. So economics is about placing value on the things that you want because we don't need anything, and making choices based on these wants. And kind of corollary to that is that nothing is free. That's right, nothing is free. So no matter what you think is free, so perhaps you're watching this lecture thinking that it's free, it's absolutely not. You're giving something up. When you make a choice, the best alternative you gave up as a result is known as the opportunity cost. So that lecture, this lecture that you're watching, you think it's free, you're not paying anything at all, that's absolutely incorrect. You're paying an opportunity cost. Instead of watching this video, you could be, you know, sitting at home playing a video game. You could be studying economics on your own. You could be studying French or Chinese or whatever else that you could come up with. You could be sleeping right now. But instead, I'm flattered that you're watching this right now because you are paying an opportunity cost for doing so. So all the possible things that you could give up would be referred to as the trade-off. So all those things that I mentioned, if you rank them in order from 1 to 10, all the things that you gave up would be a trade-off, whereas the next best alternative, so the one thing that you gave up, would be known as the opportunity cost. Yeah. So this is basically a fundamental idea, principle in economics that nothing is free. So the first thing that we talked about is that you don't need anything. And secondly, nothing is free. And finally, every choice, however large or small, will incur an opportunity cost. So again, this kind of hints at this point here is that there's nothing that's free. So whether it's a huge decision, a major life decision on what college you're planning on going to, or what you're going to eat tomorrow for breakfast, or whether you're going to eat breakfast at all, it will incur an opportunity cost. So let's go over a brief opportunity cost example. So let's say on a Saturday morning, you're faced with 3 options: watching TV, walking the dog, or sleeping in. All pleasant activities on a Saturday morning. You prefer watching TV to walking the dog, but you prefer sleeping in to walking the dog. So what is the opportunity cost of watching television? Well, you have to understand, again, the definition for opportunity cost. So let's rewrite the definition. So opportunity cost is the next best alternative. So opportunity cost is what did you give up by making the choice of, in this case, watching television. So let's take a look where watching television fits in here. So you prefer watching television to walking the dog. But you prefer sleeping in to walking the dog. So if you choose to watch television, what is the opportunity cost? Well, if watching television is better than walking the dog, but you prefer sleeping in to walking the dog, then the opportunity cost is going to be sleeping in. So the opportunity cost of watching television would be sleeping in. Basically, what you're saying is instead of watching television, what would you have been doing? And if that's sleeping in, that's your opportunity cost. Again, it seems something where individually, when you learn this, it doesn't seem that difficult. But when you get to the later, harder concepts of economics, and you realize that we're limited by our resources, understanding opportunity costs is absolutely essential in any branch of economics. So positive versus normative economics. So in this course, mainly we're going to deal with positive economics, and there's going to be some normative economics as well. But again, identifying what is positive economics versus what is normative economics is going to be essential in understanding economic theory and analysis. So let's take a look at what positive economics is about. So positive economics is a branch of economic analysis that describes the way the economy actually works. So for example, an economic statement, if a new tax is implemented, the state will collect $1 million in new revenue. So right here, you have an if and then scenario here. There's no judgment. You basically are making a projection. Now, you can maybe dispute the validity of it, but the way the statement is phrased, it's definitely a positive statement, because you're not saying whether or not the government should or shouldn't. You're specifically saying what will happen. So this is what positive economics is about, the idea of describing how the world works. Whereas normative economics is a branch of economic analysis that interjects subjective claims on how the economy should work. So a normative statement would be the government should raise taxes on higher income families in order to raise more revenue. So again, here is a normative claim saying that one system of taxation is better than another. So this is saying that basically a progressive tax system is the best way to go. And whether or not that's true or not, you're free to have your own opinion on that, but this is what a normative statement would be. So in this course, mainly we're going to deal with positive economics, trying to describe how things work, whether you should or shouldn't follow these different types of methods, whether you believe in supply side economics or whether you believe more in Keynesian economics, that's actually a separate matter of discussion. So we're going to be dealing more with positive rather than normative. So let's take a look at a couple examples with positive versus normative. So let's say a particular statement is turn the following normative statement into a positive statement. You should get a 5 on the AP Macroeconomics exam. Again, this would be great. We established that you don't need to do that, but let's turn what is a normative statement into a positive statement. So if I change it around, if I say, if you watch the entirety of my educator.com lectures, then you will get a 5 on the exam. So what I did is I just changed a normative statement into a positive statement. Now you may question whether or not that will actually happen or not, but that's phrased in a positive manner, and that's what we're looking for here. Is it phrased in a normative way or is it phrased in a positive way? And hopefully you can identify the difference between these these two statements, whether you should get a 5 on the AP Macro exam, or if you watch the entirety of my educator.com lectures, then you will get a 5 on the exam. Again, very similar sounding topic, but one is stated normatively and one is stated positively here. All right, well, let's take a look at another example here. Is it normative or positive here? So let's deal with more of a macroeconomic issue here. The government should raise income taxes on the rich in order to generate more revenue. Again, as I said before, this is a very similar example, but this is definitely a normative. Because, who's to say who should or shouldn't? Again, this is a normative issue. So again, one person may, again, believe in supply side theory, where lower taxes will actually generate more output from the supply side, whereas Keynesians might believe that it's better for the government to stimulate the economy during recessionary times. So marginal analysis, another big concept in economics, and what exactly is marginal analysis? So marginal analysis is, or thinking at the margin, it's the idea of whether or not to use one additional unit of some resources. So for example, again, right now, you've probably decided to watch up to this point. Now the question is, do you continue? Do you continue with watching these lectures, or do you decide to do something else? Again, I hope that you have marginally decided to continue on, but most decisions that we make are not all or nothing propositions. Usually it's not do I watch all 15 or 20 hours of these lectures? It's, do I watch this one lecture on scarcity? Do I watch the next lecture on comparative advantage and production possibilities frontiers? Do I watch the lecture on inflation? These are very marginal decisions that we come across every day in life. And so that's what economic analysis is, the idea that we make decisions on a marginal basis. And so it involves deciding whether or not to consume the next unit. So again, it doesn't matter what we decide to do, most things are made at the margin. So a marginal analysis example here. Let's say you make $60,000 at your current job at Wells Fargo. You're considering a job offer at Citibank in which you're offered $100,000 a year. Should you accept the new job? Well, first of all, let's identify what kind of question this is. Is this a normative or is this a positive here? Well, the word should right here, whether or not you should or should not do something, it's a normative decision. So no decision is necessarily right or wrong, okay, because it implies we don't know what necessarily one values. Do you value loyalty? Do you value higher income, flexibility? And there's not a whole lot of information other than salary here. So in order to make a decision, you are deciding between the marginal benefits versus the marginal costs. Now, clearly, there are a lot of different marginal benefits and marginal costs, and some are unknown. When you decide to take a new job, you may make a decision, but some marginal benefits come after you've accepted the job. But we're in a position where we don't know exactly, other than that you have these two, high-profile companies, and that you're making more money with one versus, less money with the other. So I would say the marginal benefit obviously would be, $40,000 increase in pay. That's probably the primary marginal benefit. Now, what's the marginal cost? Now, there's probably, again, several issues in terms of switching employers, but I would say the marginal cost is new environment. Now, again, this actually might end up becoming a marginal benefit. And again, life decisions, it's really hard to adequately assess the situation, particularly when you're delving into the unknown. But this is, again, a normative decision, and this is the type of decision where marginal analysis is very useful. Thinking about the idea of will it benefit me? And if I choose something, what is the benefit? What is the marginal benefit? And what is the marginal cost? The thing that you absolutely should not consider when you're dealing with marginal analysis is the ideal of sunk cost. So sunk cost is definitely something that really should not be considered when making a decision. So the fact that maybe you've worked at Wells Fargo for 20 years. That's a sunk cost. That's something that can't be recovered. So it's something that is not really included in your decision making. So let's take a look at the production possibilities frontier. So what we learned with scarcity and opportunity cost, this is also going to come on a production possibilities frontier, but now we're going to graph it. How's it going to look like on a graphical level here? So what is the production possibilities frontier? It's a graph that shows the combinations of output or of amounts of two items that could be produced using the same resources. All points on the graph are points of efficiency. It doesn't matter where it is. If it's on the graph, it's efficient. Again, we're trying to stay away from the normative. We're just saying what's positive. If it's on the graph, then it's going to be efficient. And if you don't use all your resources, then you have points of underutilization or inefficiency. A PPF graph shows alternative ways to use resources, but again, does not show the best way because that is a normative issue. What you should or shouldn't do, again, that's a matter of personal choice and it's subjective in nature. The most common use of a production possibilities graph would be the famous guns or butter analogy. So the idea of two resources, let's say the government has two different outputs. It could be guns, which represents the military, or it could be butter, which represents domestic goods. And let's say there's a finite amount of money that can be spent. Let's assume $1 million can be spent on either guns or butter. The one way the government could use its resources to produce guns. So one way could be, let's spend all $1 million on guns and $0 on butter. Now, alternative way could be the government can use its resources to produce butter or domestic goods, which would be $1 million worth of butter, but no guns at all, no emphasis on military. Or any combination in between would also be acceptable. Now, what this does is it highlights the trade-offs an economy faces when using scarce resources. Now, if you're a little bit critical on government spending and you believe that the government, when faced with the decision of guns or butter, with $1 million, some might argue that our government might choose to spend $1 million on butter and also $1 million on military goods and basically incur a deficit of $1 million. Well, that's also an option, but clearly there is an opportunity cost of doing that. But again, that's something that we can deal with later in terms of deficits and debt and the potential macroeconomic problems that result from that. But again, the guns or butter analogy is a good way to highlight the fact that when you choose one thing, there is an opportunity cost that the government is incurring. So let's take a look at what is increasing opportunity cost here. So increasing opportunity cost, the law of increasing opportunity cost, is the idea that more and more resources are required to produce the same amount of product. Now the curve for this type of production possibilities frontier graph is going to be concave. So let's take a look at an economy of trains and cars, for example. So let's say, for example, that an individual or an economy is either producing trains or producing cars. So let's have trains right here and cars on the y-axis here. So let's use this example, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and let's use cars here. So let's just use 200, 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. All right, an increasing opportunity cost production possibilities frontier will take more of a concave shape, but let's use the two extremes here. Let's say that they can produce 500 trains or 0 cars. So that would be one extreme. And another extreme would be, well, let's produce all cars but no trains. So it would be 0 trains but 1,000 cars. So again, trains is going to be the X value and cars is going to be the Y value. Well, let's say, for example, though, if you build 100 cars, let's say that you're gonna make 950. So let's say 100 trains and 950 cars. And let's say 200 trains will yield also 800 cars. So 200 trains and then 800 cars. And let's say another point on the production possibilities frontier would be 300 trains and 600 cars. So 300 trains and 600 cars. And let's say another point on the production possibilities frontier would be 400 trains. 400 trains here, and let's say 250 cars. 400 trains and 250 cars. So what you're doing right here, you're gonna graph, you're gonna connect the dotted lines. That's kind of a logical thing to do here. So you have the connecting of the dots right here. And again, this carries a concave shape, meaning that you cannot substitute cars and trains equally at every point. It's going to be constantly, the opportunity cost is going to be constantly increasing. So let's take a look from 0 to 100 right here. So again, let's kind of dot the lines right here. Dot the lines right here. Dot the lines at this point here. Dot the lines here at 400, and then this would be 250 right here. So the opportunity cost of going from 0 to 100 is you gave up 50 cars. So you lost 50 cars here. So the opportunity cost of the first 100 trains, so you gain 100 trains, the opportunity cost was 50 cars. So again, what's better? Again, that's a normative issue, so we're not really going to answer that right now. But we're just going to say this was the gain and this was the cost. So you gained 100 trains and you lost 50 cars here. Well, let's gain another 100 trains right here. So 100 to 200 right here. And you went from 950 to 800. Now you lost 150 cars. So the opportunity cost of gaining an additional 100 trains was now you lost 150 cars. So notice how the opportunity cost got higher. You have the same amount of trains, but the opportunity cost got higher. So now you add another 100 trains at this point, and now you only have 600 cars. So now the opportunity cost gets even higher. So it's negative 200. So the opportunity cost is 200 cars, represented by negative 200. And to build 100 more trains from 300 to 400, now you have 250, so the opportunity cost is even steeper, 350 cars. Okay. Now to build, actually, given the numbers that I actually gave, it went from 100 trains here, and notice it went from 250 to 0, so negative 250. So this actually, if you see, at this point, it's an increasing opportunity cost, and actually the way this is probably going to be graphed here for some odd reason, it's going to be a decreasing opportunity cost. But again, if you use a number here, usually it's going to be increasing opportunity cost. So the first 4 here highlights the law of increasing opportunity cost. As you try to build more and more trains, what you're finding is that the cost of making it goes higher and higher, from 50 cars to 150 to 200 to 350. So what is constant opportunity cost? So increasing opportunity cost is exactly that. The costs get higher and higher. Well, constant opportunity cost is going to be exactly that as well. You're going to get the same cost as you move up and down the production possibilities frontier. So let's use this as an example. So constant opportunity cost. You have the same resources are required to produce a certain amount of a product. Again, the production possibilities frontier, it's going to be a downward sloping line. It's not going to be concave like it was with increasing opportunity cost. You're going to have a downward sloping line. So let's take a look at an economy of MacBook Airs and iPads. So on the x-axis, we're going to have MacBook Airs. Nice little machines, MacBook Airs. And on the y-axis, we're going to deal with the iPad. Okay. So again, let's use some arbitrary numbers here. Let's say 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500, And you have iPad. Let's use the same 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500. Well, it's really easy here. So let's say you can make 500 MacBook Airs. So this would be the X here. And iPads, you can make 0 iPads. Well, again, if it's constant opportunity cost, then the opportunity cost is going to be the same here. So you can make 0 MacBook Airs, or you can make 500 iPads. Now, if you move along the production possibilities frontier, you can decide to produce 100 MacBook Airs, but now you're giving up production of another 100 iPads. Now you can produce 100 more as well, but now you're getting 200 MacBook Airs and only 300 iPads. And then you could produce 100 more, but again, you see the trend. The opportunity cost is going to be constant. So 300 MacBook Airs, and you have now 400. You have not 400. Excuse me. You're going to have 200 iPads. Similarly, if you decide to make 400 MacBook Airs, then you are going to have 100 iPads. And again, if you connect the dotted lines here, then you're going to have a constant cost production possibilities frontier. So notice here, you increased 100 each time, and you lost 100 iPads. So the opportunity cost, you have a constant rate of substitution here. So here, it's actually, you can actually mathematically find this in equation where you have one iPad equals 1 MacBook Air. And you can actually find comparative advantage when you're dealing with this. So one iPad equals 1 MacBook Air. And again, it's actually another concept where when you deal with production possibilities frontier, in the second lecture, I'll deal with, well, how does that look with absolute advantage and comparative advantage? So in my second lecture, I'm going to be dealing with how do you deal with something that's equally substitutable, and how can you actually find comparative advantage based on that? So that's something that in the second lecture we're going to deal with. So example number 1, let's take a look at a constant or at an increasing opportunity cost production possibilities frontier. So again, let's say that you have cars and computers, and here's a particular scenario here. What is the opportunity cost of building 500 more computers from 2,000 to 2,500? So let's say you have built 2,000 computers. Well, if you've built 2,000 computers, then what's implied is that if you're efficient. So anywhere inside the production possibilities frontier, this would be points of underutilization. Okay, or another way of saying it would be inefficient. Okay, so different points of efficiency here would be 2,000 computers and 700 cars. So the assumption is that if you built 2,000 computers, is that you also have built 700 cars in order to be efficient here. So what is the opportunity cost of building 500 more computers from 2,000 to 2,500? Again, assuming that you have been efficient using all your resources. Now, what you end up having is you make 2,500 computers, but now your production is only 500 cars. So the question here is, what is the opportunity cost? What is the opportunity cost of building those extra 500 cars? And the answer here is going to be your opportunity cost, since you drop production of 200 cars here from 700 to 500, the opportunity cost is 200 cars. Now, second example here, what is the opportunity cost of building, let's say you build 500 more computers, but this time from 2,500 actually, 2,000 to 2,500, that was the original situation. But what happens if you are going from 2,500 to 3,000? So what is the opportunity cost if you're dealing with this situation here? So you have 2,500 computers, and now you have 500 cars. But what happens if now you shift production so that you have 3,000 computers and now you have 0 cars? Okay, so what is now the opportunity cost? Well, let's take a look here. Well, you added 500, so we know that the gain is 500. But the opportunity cost now, you went from 500 cars to 0. So you lost 500 cars. So the opportunity cost is 500 cars. So this highlights, again, the law of increasing opportunity cost. From this point to this point here, you lost 200 cars. But from this point to this point, you lost 500 cars. So you increased your loss from 200 to 500. Hence, this is the law of increasing opportunity cost. Now let's take a look at example number 3 here. Now we're going to actually work out the same exact scenario, except now we're going to flip it so that you're able to understand opportunity costs on this production possibilities frontier, both going left to right, but also moving down to up as well here. So let's assume that you've built 3,000 computers, but you have no cars. Okay, so again, same situation here. So you have 3,000 computers and 0 cars. Now, how do you look at opportunity cost when you're moving upward right here? So again, this point right here is still going to be 2,500 computers, but now it's 500 cars. The only difference here is now you're looking at the perspective of cars, so you're looking at the Y value, the cars, Y value. Now, when you're going from 0 to 500, you add 500 cars, but now again, the idea of opportunity cost, you give something up, you choose to produce more cars, but what was the cost? Again, there's no monetary cost depicted here. It's the cost of foregone computers that you would have produced here. So you gave up production of 500 computers. So the opportunity cost is 500 computers. So that's the way of finding opportunity cost and production possibilities frontier, moving down, going up. So reading it through the lens of the y-axis here. Now, what happens? What is the opportunity cost of building 200 more computers from 500 to 700? Here, it's 2,500 computers and 500 cars. Now, what's going to happen if you decide to build more cars here? So now you'll have less computers. You have 2,000 computers, but now you have 700 cars. So again, what do you gain? What's the gain from doing this? Well, you gain 200 cars, but now you're looking at what is the opportunity cost here. So the opportunity cost, you gain 200 cars, but guess what? You gave up 500 computers. So again, the whole point of looking at a production possibilities frontier from this perspective is that being able to understand going left to right, but also down and up. Again, the more conventional way of looking at opportunity cost is looking from left to right and being able to identify what specifically is being given up. But at the same time, you don't want to neglect the fact that you can actually move, you can move up and down as well. So it doesn't have to be left to right. It could be down to up. And keep in mind, there's no point, whether it's here or making all computers or making all cars, none is necessarily better than the other. Again, that would be a normative statement. The whole point of a production possibilities frontier is to give a positive statement of if you use certain resources to build computers, then you get this amount. If you use a certain amount of resources to build cars, then you get this amount. Thank you for watching educator.com.